Premiere Pro? Because there's a couple of little bumps when you first launch the application, and I want to smooth those bumps out for you here today with my delicate, loving hands. This is what Premiere Pro splash screen looks like. It's pretty easy to see that you're going to make a new project by hitting on the new project tab. Don't say hitting on in America. That means something very different. So I'm going to call this something like that. There's a bunch of settings in here, right? So I can choose how my timecode's displayed. This is just a DV or HDV capture format, so if you do have AJA hardware or whatever, that's not relevant. And just like with anything, here I can set my scratch disks. Where do I want my render files, my capture files to go? The good thing I would recommend you do, mostly speaking, is just save them all in the same place as the project. That's what I've done. But we do have, the ability to be more, to use more storage. If you're working with a SAN or something, you can set all those things up. So that bit's easy. We've made a new project. I'll hit OK. This is the bit that really scares people, and it's understandable because it's a pretty damn scary dialogue. This is the new sequence dialogue. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of our big strengths is this native support for huge amounts of different media formats. What's the disadvantage of having native support for huge amounts of media formats? Generally speaking, you have to have quite a lot of sequence settings. So you can see we've got pretty much a sequence setting for every format. And in here, I can set how my audio tracks want to behave and so on, and various settings, which we won't go into for the sake of time. Here's a little trick. That cancel button doesn't really mean cancel. It just means don't make a new sequence. You can launch the project with everything in place with no sequences. I recommend you do that because I'll show you a trick of how a much easier way to get started. So this is what Premiere Pro looks like when it's empty. Top left-hand corner is the project. That's very similar to the browser. We've got source and program monitors. You might want to call them Canvas and Record. What are they called? Canvas and Viewer, yeah, but very, very similar in concept. Timeline goes down there. This is my media browser. This I will show you in a minute. This is the thing that has the brains for all this native media support. But let's go ahead and import that Final Cut Pro project and carry on working. There's various ways I can do it. I can go to the File menu, choose Import. I can do Command-I, boring. But nice little trick. Double-click on the Project tab. There you go, that's cool. Yep. Okay, so date modified. There's my XML, and I'm going to hit Import. This reads the XML, goes through, finds the media, gives me a folder. That was easy. If I look in the folder, I've got my 3 ProRes 422 clips. Because I'm on a Mac, and because I have Final Cut installed, I have the ProRes 422 codecs, so we can work with them, right? Okay? And there I have my sequence. I'm going to double-click on my sequence, and I'm going to pull that apart, pull it open, and let's hit play. Now this is what it was supposed to look like, but what I want you to see it's much better, isn't it?
What the hell?
Look at this! It gets better. Wait, because the next shot's a bit blurry. Woo! Don't worry about the project.
That's excellent.
All the same media, all the same sequence, brackets S, close brackets, parentheses. So really, really easy to bring your projects in and then start working. Continue working, okay? So that's really cool, right? That normally gets a round of applause, but never mind. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now what do I want to do? Well, you know what? I want to make this work like Final Cut Pro 7 as much as possible in the early stages of learning. So what might I do? Something you should definitely probably do first of all is go to the keyboard shortcuts dialog, which is conveniently named keyboard shortcuts and wasn't before. Go to the keyboard shortcuts dialog, and this is a really useful thing to know, largely because you can do this, okay? And that's 95% of them, and we're working on the remaining 5. But also, yeah, and if you're a media composer, if you're one of the remaining media composer users, you can do that too. Sorry. But a really nice thing about this is if you don't know what a keyboard shortcut is, this box is searchable. I wonder what the keyboard shortcut for trim is. I'll search for trim. It's T. Okay, bad example, but you get the idea. So really useful dialog box. So bring your XML in, change the keyboard shortcuts, and you can carry on working. Now I might want to import some more media. I brought the media in, but let's face it, whilst this is good, it could do with a little bit more work, right? So let's go ahead and bring some more media in. Now this is where the media browser comes into its own. Think of the media browser as something that browses your files and folders, your connected storage, but is clever. It's clever because it understands tapeless media formats natively. So what I'm going to do, and it's a bit awkward because I just have to navigate through some directories here, I'm just going to navigate to a folder that's got some media in it. I've spoiled the surprise there, but never mind. And here's a folder called Assets. Now, You'll see 3 down, there's a Canon XF directory. Canon XF, just like P2, just like XDCam, puts its media in a very convoluted set of multiple folders with a load of metadata and stuff. Normally, you have to double-click through all these folders, find a clip that's called something confusing. If you just double-click on a directory, all I've done is copy the media. This immediately switches me into Canon XF mode, because the media browser understands Canon XF. It understands the folder structure and what it means. These are just the native Canon XF clips. The same is true, you'll see they're grayed out because I don't have that content in this directory, for all these different types, AVCHD, P2, RED, HDV, etc. And we natively understand them, and so we can bring them in really easily. How do I bring media in? Well, I might want to audition it first. Do that by double-clicking till that launches it into the source monitor, and I can scrub around and see if I like it. If I do, there's a number of things I can do. I can drag drop it into the project, and that imports it, right? Really easy. So that's just that native MXF file. It's just pointing to it. No copy, no transcode. I'll keep making that point, but it's just that same chunk of media. I could also splice it into a sequence to import it. So I could load a clip into my source monitor, and I could make a new sequence from that clip. This is a feature we've had for a while, but we hid it away as best we possibly could in CS5, so nobody could find it. And one of the things you'll notice when you start using CS5, if you've used CS5 and now you start using 5.5, is that a lot of these features are they're just much easier to find. It's all about discoverability, so we're making sure that these key features are easy to find. So if I have that clip selected, I'm just going to rummage through here, just arbitrarily mark an I and an O point, an in and an out point. Then with that clip selected, I can go File, New, Sequence from Clip. So remember I was showing you how confusing the new sequence dialog box is? Just don't use it, right? Just hit that cancel button. That's the volume button, which is no use. And that's just made me a brand new sequence featuring that media. There's no render bar because it's native to that media format, and I can start moving on, right? So there's a nice clip, nice trick, or whatever. So I know Final Cut has that, but a lot of people can't find it. There's other ways to do it, but this is a really nice, easy feature. What else might we want to do? Well, we might want to build this sequence up. So let's load another clip in. Let's just import another one. It doesn't really matter. We did a lot of work in between CS5 and 5.5 because we genuinely were having a lot more Final Cut Pro editors and Avid editors wanting to try this out. And what we did was we kind of had these focus groups, you might want to call them, where we watched them work and we worked out what things they couldn't find or what things they tried to do and they couldn't do. We're not in the business of making something that's the same as Final Cut, of course. We have our own unique features, but we want to make sure it's easy to work with. One of the things that a Final Cut Pro editors really like to do, let's just tab to the end of the sequence here, is they like, sorry, I'm talking to you like they're a different bunch of people. A lot of you I know like to use the feature of drag drop to program monitor, pick up from the source, drag to the program to do a simple edit. We've had that functionality for ages, but again, we just hid it under a load of confusing code or something. So we'll just pick it up, drag it over. That's because I don't have a track targeted, so let's just make sure this is going to work. Oh, demo gremlins, don't you love them? Let's try a different track. All right, don't worry, let's try a different thing here. Let's go to a different sequence. So we should be able to just pick this clip up, and it's not working because I'm doing a demo. All right, let's try that. There you go. Okay, so that never happens. But pick it up, drag it over, and drop it onto the source monitor. That will be something to do with my track targeting, but I'm not going to stand here and try and work it out. So drag drop to program is another feature that has been asked for a great deal, and we've got these things in there now. So if you're not already feeling like you probably could get to learn this software pretty quickly, then hopefully you do now. Let's open a more exciting project and show you some of the cool stuff we can do.
Hey, can I ask one thing?
Who's that? Hello, Dave. This is my colleague, Dave.
So the red render bar that was over the Final Cut piece, right?
Yeah.
The only reason it's red, if you guys are curious, because I heard some chatter, it's just because all of those effects are using CPU. It's not meaning it won't play in real time. So that's one difference from a lot of other programs. It's using CPU versus GPU, which might be yellow or whatever. So just so you guys know, red just means all effects are using CPU.
So I will get to the Mercury engine in a second and the GPU thing, but thanks, Dave, absolutely. All right, so let's have a little bit of a look at some of the other things we can do. I talked again about all this native media format support being one of our key features. This is a red clip that I have in my project now. It's a .r3d, and I just drag-dropped it in from the red folder, okay? So this is not using proxies, this is not using the QuickTime reference movies that you see in the R3D folder. This is just the R3D file itself. I can play it back. This is actually a 3K file. I can hit play and play it back. One of our really nice features is this thing we call fractional resolutions. If you find that you're trying to play red media from a FireWire 800 drive on a 2-generation-old MacBook Pro, you might want to use this. So I've already dropped it down. So you can drop the playback resolution of clips down. This also comes into its own when you have really complicated sequences. Here's one. This is a sequence which actually has about 8 or 9 streams of video in it. I'll just hit play. You can see what's going on. It's like an effects build. You can see the sort of source shots in the top across that white bar. We've got a load of live effects in here. This thing on video 1 is in fact a composite sequence, or a nested sequence, I should say, and it's got a load of real-time effects in it. Like the Ultra Keyer, which is doing the green screen removal. It's got a garbage mat and all that stuff. Now, I've got a red render bar, as Dave pointed out. I've got a red render bar because this is a really complex sequence. And Premiere Pro saying, you know, you've got a load of real-time effects, you've got 8 streams of 1080p Canon XF. I might struggle with this. Mercury Playback Engine is the thing that handles the media playback and the effects. Think of Mercury as being 3 things. 64-bit, multi-core, multi-threaded, modern CPU optimization, that's the second thing. And 3, optional support for a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs. If you have a supported NVIDIA GPU, and there are a couple that are supported on the Mac, but admittedly there's not very many, sorry about that, we're working on it. If you have a supported NVIDIA GPU, you'd be able to go to your playback settings and enable it if it wasn't already enabled. What that would do is offload a bunch of the processes that would normally happen on the CPU, as Dave just pointed out, like those real-time effects, like everything. If I don't have a GPU, it's all on the CPU. We can offload a bunch of those tasks and playback performance would be much smoother. Without one, however, we can use fractional resolutions. So this really, really complex sequence I've set to play back to a quarter, and as you can see, whilst the resolution does drop slightly, I'm basically able to play back every frame. So that's a feature of Mercury